welcome to Cloud Interview Questions, an initiative from Cloudvaathi. So today we are going to see what are all the advantages of cloud computing over the traditional on-premise model. We all know multiple organizations who already have their own applications and resources running even before cloud computing. They have their services available in traditional on-premise. But after the emergence or launch of cloud computing, most of these organizations are moving to cloud computing because cloud computing has various advantages over the on-premise models. So we need to understand what are the limitations with respect to on-premise model and how cloud computing is actually helping to overcome these. The first one is all the organizations will have something called average load, right, which is number of users visiting the website at any point in time, right? And there is something called peak load. Peak load comes when we actually expect additional traffic for an e-commerce website when they announce some great Indian festival or any shopping festival, right? In that time, they can expect a peak load wherein maximum users will try and visit the application, right? So if you take like it would be around like 20 days for an entire year, there'll be like 20 days in which they may have this peak load, right? So if they have, so they need to configure additional servers in order to like satisfy the peak load, right? For all this they have to actually wait, so that there has to be a waiting period of 6 to 7 days wherein like they have to request, their senior management has to approve the cost, and it may be like redirected to a third party. So they will sign that, and they will assign an engineer, they will do some scrum call, they will discuss and configure. So by default the waiting time to configure an additional server will be like up to 6 to 8 days. But when we move to cloud computing, it is an on-demand availability. So you have like two servers, you feel like you may have some additional load today, right? Or at any point you may even think like you may require an additional load or additional server now. You can just directly go to the portal and spin up a VM to serve that additional capacity. It is always available on demand compared to your planned waiting period or mandatory waiting period during the peak loads. The second one is that is for the planned traffic. What if it is an unplanned traffic, right? What if suddenly something has gone viral, your application or product has gone viral, right? In those cases, the on-premises doesn't have an inbuilt capability to handle those ad hoc traffic spikes. If something suddenly, if your application is has gone viral and everyone is visiting your website or application, then uh, with your on-premise, you will not be able to handle those requests. Your service will go down, right? But when you go to cloud computing, we have a concept called auto scaling, which means based on the user traffic at any point in time, the number of servers to handle that can be increased or decreased. If it is increasing, then we call it as scaling out. If it is decreasing, then we call it as scale in, right? So based on the user traffic, like I have two servers. If I get a traffic for which like two servers, it would exceed the capacity of two servers, then it can automatically spin up additional VM, right, to handle that extra request. Again, it may spin up another VM. So currently I have four VMs. Now my traffic has subsided. Now it can again like reduce one of the VM. So everything can be configured with the help of auto scaling rules. Third is, so to avoid like this waiting period, as we discussed in the point one, many of the enterprise large scale organizations, they used to procure additional servers, right? So they don't want to wait this like 6 to 8 days of time or 1 week of time. So they always like procure additional servers and they will just keep it idle. As and when there is an additional traffic or an ad hoc traffic, they will just spin up the VM at that time itself. So the resources, and for all these resources, standalone resources, we need to provide separate, power, separate air conditioning to cool down the systems. Right? After setting up all this, these servers will remain idle. Right? But in case since we can run the resources on demand, since we can spin off the resources or launch the resources on demand, in cloud computing, it is always an effective utilization of resources. So we can just procure whatever server we need to maintain the average load, right? And if there are any peak loads, then on demand I can spin up another VMs. right? So that is the effective utilization of resources. The fourth point is, even though like large enterprises, they are procuring these additional servers and they are keeping it idle, whether they run the server or not, whether the server is running or not, they still have to pay for it, right? The charge billing is happening on a monthly basis, and irrespective of whether they use the server, whether they utilize the services or not, they still have to pay for it in a traditional on-premise model. But in a cloud on-premise, we have something called metered service, which is pay per use, right? So my application, it is running on an average of two servers. Like every time, for the entire month, it will run with the help of two servers. So I'll pay for those two servers, and at one time there is an ad hoc traffic, ad hoc spike. So four like additional servers were running, right, for 4 hours, right? So at the end of the month, my billing would be, for the two servers, I will be charged for the entire month, like the 720 hours. And for those four servers, I have to just pay for the four additional hours only. For the four servers, only for those 4 hours, right? So I have to just pay for whatever I have consumed, right? It is the pay per use model, especially it is charged on an hourly basis. Okay, so that is the biggest advantage of cloud computing, for which the organizations are now moving into, right? They don't want to pay for something that they are not using or leveraging the services. Instead, they prefer cloud computing where they are just charged for the number of hours that they are consuming the services. And last point is, to configure these on-premise additional servers, we need to have some in-house trained technical personnel. Or if we are like assigning it to a third party, then we have to bring the third party like contractor to our on premise and configure these additional resources. But in case of cloud computing, anyone can actually go and spin up a VM. Everything has been like automated and orchestrated in the backend, so that we can just go to a UI portal and we can directly like configure a server with different specifications, and we will be able to use the services. So these are the advantages of the cloud computing over on premises, and that is why every organization is now jumping into cloud computing. Thank you and see you tomorrow.